Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life. My name is NBZ and we're here at episode 105 of this fine show. I'm joined as always, as ever, by the stalwart host who lives across the sea. It's Bally. How are you doing, Bally?
I am very good. Did you have a good Thanksgiving weekend?
Oh yes, because I was celebrating with my turkey. Of course, yes. I do. That is what I eat on the Thanksgiving. No, Bally.
I went to a Thanksgiving meal. It was great.
I mean, yeah, you did because you're associating with some American people. Right. So, how was that experience?
It was good. I was skeptical. I was worried about there being enough good food and it to be hot, but there was a lot of good food. It wasn't all massively hot, but it worked out well.
You said you've had bad experiences with Thanksgivings in the past.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think that the idea of lots of people bringing food to a gathering, it's just very hard to get it all hot, and I'm a big fan of hot food.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about timing, is making sure things stay piping, because I'm one of those people who really can't stand when my hot food goes cold.
Right.
My sister, on the other hand, doesn't give a fuck, and so she will just eat anything at any time.
Yeah, I know people like that. They're just crazy.
Yeah,
it's like
can't deal with it. My dad is the same, because sometimes he'll put stuff in the microwave to heat up, and then he gives it to me. I'm like, Dad, this is nowhere near hot enough. Like, what is your threshold for what hot is?
Yeah.
So that happens a lot. In any case, I hope everyone in America who listens to this podcast had a nice Thanksgiving, and I hope everyone else across the world also had a nice Thursday, because Thursday's a pretty good day.
And I hope everyone had a great Black Friday. And everyone didn't. Sure. No one got crushed by the crowds, and
I really don't know how many people actually go outside on Black Friday anymore, because it seems like just online's the way to go these days.
I saw a hilarious tweet based on, it's like some department store in London, and they were these film camera crews were like there, ready to like film the morning when the shop opened in the morning, and basically there was just one guy waiting, and he just walked very orderly once the door opened, and it was just emphasizing that the whole Black Friday thing has maybe dropped off a tad in the UK this year.
Yeah, maybe. I don't think it even really got started to begin with. It was only like the last couple of years.
There were a few sort of rampages.
Yeah, maybe, but also we're British, so generally I don't think we do the stampede thing as much as the Americans do.
Yes, but, we queue.
Of course, of course.
It's not a line; it's a queue.
Let's stop talking about rampant consumerism and instead move on to a different sort of rampant consumerism, that is video games.
Exactly.
Instead, a much more artful rampant consumerism. So, Bally, what are we going to be talking about in the show today? And then, actually, before that, we should probably plug the fact that, hey, we have Patreon, and also, thank you for people for supporting us on the Patreon. We hit our first goal on the Patreon.
Thank you.
Which unlocked our first podcast, which is our TNL Ranks show, where we'll be ranking various video game things. It'll be a fun time, and the first episode shall hopefully go up a week after this show goes live. So if you would like to get access to that new show, that new podcast, which will be Patreon exclusive, you can go over to patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, and it's the $2 tier there. Any support you can give, always appreciated, but thank you for the people so far who've supported us. Bally, now you can tell us what we're going to be talking about in the rest of the show.
As usual, we are going to talk about what we have been playing. We have an email segment for our second segment, and the third segment is, we're coming to the end of the year. It's feeling that holiday season feel, and of course that means Game of the Year is coming up. But before our Game of the Year, there's the Keeleys, the Video Game Awards, or they're just called the Game Awards.
They're called the Game Awards,
Game Awards. They're coming up on December 8th, right?
Absolutely.
So we are going to go through sort of all the nominees, the categories, and give a rundown on what we think will win and also what we want to win. And there's quite a lot of Nintendo showing this year, which is exciting.
Yes, two games in particular seem to be just everywhere,
popping up
across
everywhere.
The board.
Which two games could this possibly be?
That would be Bird and Beans and, of course, the seminal classic Ninja Gaiden. So,
I thought it was going to be Pokemon Sun and Moon Ultra.
Right, Ultra Sun and Moon.
Yeah,
just the most revolutionary games to be released this year. Absolutely remarkable piece
Reinventing the wheel.
Oh, boy. Anyway, let's kick things off by talking about some video games. Bally, what have you been playing last couple of weeks?
I've been working back through a bit of Mario Odyssey. I'm sort of going back through each kingdom systematically with a podcast on, trying to 100% the moons in each kingdom. I'm not going for purple coins. I've decided it's not worth it. I know my Odyssey will look a little empty at the end, but it's fine. I just want to get all the moons and move on with my life. So I'm currently just done the Cascade Kingdom. I'm now in Tortarina, I think it's called.
Toasterina,
there we go. The Sand Kingdom. So I'm working my way through that one. I'm going to keep doing that probably for the rest of the year until I get to that magical...
The rest of your life, you mean?
Yeah, the rest of my life. As a result, Stardew has taken a bit of a back seat. I'm probably going to play more of that over the Christmas period because it's, farming.
It's a nice cozy game, isn't it? To just like sit up in a chair and
pick up and play. There's family about, so I don't want to maybe dive into games whole hog. I want to be able to dip in and out, which will be good. And then obviously I've been dipping a little bit into Final Fantasy VI for our Backlog Club, which we will obviously talk about at the start of next year. But the main thing I've been playing, this game originally came out in 2014, actually, right?
It's 2015.
2015, and that was Rocket League. So
yeah.
And it was a really unusual price. It was something like £11 and 13 pence or something. It was like, £10. It was weird. Anyway, it really does feel just as good as I remember it from playing at friends' houses in 2015 when they bought it on PlayStation 4. So it actually runs and looks really good.
So for the uninitiated, I'm sure most people know, but what is Rocket League, Bally?
Rocket League is football. I should say soccer with cars, and everyone. I've told a number of people, including Caroline. Oh yeah, there's this game coming out called Rocket League. I'm so excited for it. And she's like, all right, what is it? I'm like, it's football with cars, and she was like, that sounds awful.
It does, doesn't it? As a pitch, it just sounds really horrendous.
Exactly, and I remember Daniel Dwyer with his documentary, right, and he talked to the team behind it. I've forgotten their name already.
Psyonix is the
Psyonix. Team. So Psyonix was sort of selling what Rocket League was to, I believe, the press teams at Sony when they were doing their whole free-to-play launch and stuff. And they sold it as it's soccer with cars, and they were like, what's the big deal? But it works. It just works, and I'm loving it so far. I say it runs well. I should say that occasionally on certain stages the resolution will drop considerably, and that's for stages where there's maybe a lot of snow effects or rain, or there's only a handful of stages where I've noticed it drop considerably. And the great thing is that the frame rate by and large almost always stays constant, which really makes a difference. It might look a bit grainy at times, but honestly, with a game where action is so important, like Rocket League, we're talking about a sports game, you really want that frame rate to hold up, and it does, to my experience.
They made the right choice, essentially. They could have made it look pretty and made it, be more comparable to the PS4 version, but they scaled it down, and they were like, okay, it may be a bit pixely here, but it's going to be smooth as butter the whole way through. And honestly, when you're playing a game like that, you really don't focus on the texture quality or how good the car looks versus the other car, because it's so fast paced, and because you're focused on playing the game. The frame rate is the thing that matters the most, and so they definitely made the right choice there.
Definitely.
And so I've been playing the game as well, because we actually received a review copy courtesy of Psyonix, so thanks to them for providing that. Unfortunately, Bally, you were so eager to play this game that you bought it on release date, and we didn't get the copy in until a couple of days later. So I was like, oh, Bally, we got a copy. I can't give it to you because you already bought it, so I guess I'll play the game now, which has been interesting.
But then we both had it, and we've played some online, and it's been a really good time.
Yeah, so I was someone who was more skeptical about Rocket League because I'm someone who's not a massive football fan. I used to be back in the day, but it's just not really been my thing. And I'm also terrible at driving games, just awful, and can't move a car.
It's just this game is made for you, MBZ.
Right, to save my life, essentially. So jumping into Rocket League was a very interesting experience, because there are a few aspects of it that I think are very accommodating to people, and I think the major one that stuck out to me is the camera system and how that works. Essentially, because the ball is just bounding around so fast and it's very bouncy and there's a lot of physics going on in the game, it's hard to keep track of. And so they implemented a system where if you press the X button, your camera essentially locks to where the ball is. So no matter where you are, wherever you're driving on the arena, you're always in control of, or you know where the ball is. So you can come at it from different angles and you can attack it when you need to, and you can like boost into it. The problem with that is that sometimes it changes the controls. So like when you're looking, you're like driving towards the camera, essentially, your kind of the way you move from left to right is different from what it should be in your head. It's kind of like a mirror kind of reverse thing going on.
The controls never actually change. So if you just think of it in that way. So you're right. If you're focused on the ball, but the car is driving towards the screen, you're turning left to go right on the screen. But actually, if you imagine you're in the other camera view, which is what happens when you press X, so you look behind the camera and you're essentially third person looking at the car. Then a left will be a left. But yeah, I was personally okay with that and like just working out.
The only time I found it to be an issue is when I start driving up a wall, because that really messes me up. And more often than not, I just end up on the ceiling and like then just fall to the ground from the ceiling, which is really, really bad. But so I've kind of tried. I don't know how you've been doing with the camera, but I've kind of tried to switch it so that when I'm trying to go for a goal, I'm trying to head on hit the ball, I'm turning that camera off, because otherwise when you're trying to dribble it or whatnot, because your camera is moving to where the ball is, and if your dribbling is slightly off, it will maybe decenter you from where you want to be, as opposed to being like straight onto it. So that's what I've been kind of toggling between them. I don't know if you've been trying the non-locked on mode. I'm
actually in the camera that locks onto the ball 99% of the time, because I've just sort of trained myself that that's how I play the game, and I'm almost in my head visualizing the arena and reference points in my head of where I think the ball is going in terms of like defending my own goal and stuff. So when the only time I switch out of that camera is when I want to run over a boost pad. So there's like sort of some boost pads give you like 10% boost and others give you 100% boost. So I will.
They're like the ones in the corner of the arena mainly.
Exactly. So I'll frequently just turn the camera to look behind my car, and I'll look for a 100% boost pad, go over that, and then swap straight back to the ball tracking camera. So yeah, and that just sort of works the best for me. So yeah, it runs really well. I think that I did try out the other modes. So I'm like, they're non-soccer modes. So there's one game
it's essentially kind of seasonal stuff like the ice hockey, but instead of what Overwatch does, which is to do those for like a limited period of time and then take them away, they kind of just kept them in the game, just added them and left them there, which is cool. And the one thing I really want to mention, which is so important to the health of this game, particularly on Switch, is the fact that they allow the cross-platform play. And what that does is it means it opens you up to the entire PC and Xbox audience of Rocket League players. And so you have a huge pool. I was on last night and it was like 120,000 people online. And that just wouldn't be the case if it was just drawing from Switch players alone. So it means that some of the lesser played modes, despite the fact that there may be only 500 or 600 people playing, that's a significant amount and enough to where you can easily jump in and still get a game on one of those modes. Whereas in other games, sometimes it gets to the point where, like even playing some Titanfall late in the game when it had been out for a while, it was even hard to just get a match in some of these different modes because there weren't enough people there, and there weren't enough bodies to fill the servers, essentially. So I tried all these other modes. So you've got drop shot, which is, it's kind of hard to explain, but essentially it's really weird. It's essentially like half the arena is yours and half is theirs.
It's a bit like volleyball in a sense, where
breaking tiles on the floor and then trying to get it through the broken tiles.
The ball breaks tiles on the floor and then the ball wants to go through the tiles, and that's how you score a goal. It's a bit strange. Ice hockey, it just replaces the ball with a puck. I don't actually think there's any ice physics with the driving.
No, it didn't feel like it.
Which is a good thing, personally, because the number of times video games just go for ice and slippy movement, and this happens all the time with like Mario. It was fun the first time maybe, but like we're so far down the line of ice effects in video games, I'm just so tired of it now, I think.
Sure.
So I'm glad it doesn't have that. Basketball, which is you essentially have baskets, which are very strange because the ball will reflect off them, but the cars can drive through them. And the whole court, the whole well, it's not a stadium, it's a court, is very, very small. I really didn't enjoy either of these modes. I think maybe I could potentially get into them, but it just doesn't feel anything like as much fun as soccer.
Oh wow, what a surprise. Vanilla boy number one only likes the vanilla game.
Well, yeah, and no, but here's where I differ from being called vanilla, because vanilla in this game is 3-on-3. And I've played quite a lot of 3v3 versus Caroline, and it's fun, and she actually beats me fairly often 3-on-3. But the thing is, I way prefer 2-on-2 because I just have so much more control over the match. Whereas I feel like I can...
Right, and you also have much more opportunity to interact with the ball yourself when there are fewer players on the field.
I feel like I can play really well 3-on-3 and still lose, like, many times. And sometimes I can have a really rubbish game 3-on-3 and win. And I'm like, this isn't fair. I should be winning when I play well and losing when I play badly. And I feel like the more... So you can also go 4 versus 4, which I tried a couple, and that's just horrible personally. I don't...
Seems like chaos.
It's a bit chaotic. So yeah, 2v2, you can really... And I think the computer intelligence, especially once I play normally on Pro, so Rookie's the basic, and then Pro is the next one up, and then the next 2 tiers are pretty insane, and I've not really gone there yet, but the Pro setting, if you hang back, the computer will go towards the ball, and likewise, if you go to the ball, the computer will hang back, which is like a really nice system. So me and Caroline played a ton on like 2v2, and I really enjoyed that, and I feel like I'm really getting better, and overall, it's just a great experience. Like, this is now my go-to sort of online Switch experience to just, tune in, have a game. Having said that, the next one after that is Splatoon 2, and we know that there's a ton of stuff coming to Splatoon 2. So
yeah, big updates. I haven't actually jumped back into it yet, but I know there's lots of new stuff.
If it hadn't been for all that extra new stuff for Splatoon 2, I think Rocket League would by some way be my go-to, just because I really, really love that formula. And it's not a huge game, there's not a ton of modes, but there's enough modes, and it's a really standard sports game essentially. I know that there's a career mode. I've not tried it yet. I don't know if that's like how that works or whether it's online.
I imagine it's just playing against bots, a lot of it. I haven't tried it either.
Yeah, and I imagine they just get gradually better. But I mean, there is a really good tutorial mode. I'd enjoy more stuff in this game that helped you more with tutorials and like spiking the ball out of the sky and...
Yeah, how are you finding the kind of aerial stuff? Because that seems the kind of next barrier to breach with me for Rocket League is
right.
I've got my head around like the basics, I know what I'm doing, but like jumping into the air, then using your boost to kind of hover, like stay in the air and control the ball aerially seems like something. When I look at this game, I clearly see the line between being okay at the game and being very good at the game.
Oh yeah, I've played with some insanely good people online, and they are just the game doesn't take place on the ground anymore. It's just purely in the sky, and I did not have an enjoyable experience whatsoever playing them online because I was just completely out of the game. I am getting better at spiking out the sky, and the thing with spiking out the sky is there doesn't really need to be control in the sense. Everyone thinks that like, oh, you gotta angle it and then you spike it just at this angle. Essentially, spiking it out, as long as you're making contact with the ball, nothing else matters, and it's all about the control of getting to make that contact, because all you're doing is spiking it out the sky to put the ball into the goal scoring zone essentially, and the opposition's end of the pitch where you can score a goal. So I'm getting so much better at boosting through the sky and getting that early touch on the ball. It gets the ball up at the opposition end and I can create a goal. I think that there have been a number of times where I've done it defensively, and then you're massively out of position because you're having to boost through the sky in order to do this. So you end up turning around, driving all the way back to your own goal to defend, and often I've been late and concede a goal, and that's not good. So I think it is something that you only want to do when you're really going, you're really going for it. You're not defending as hard or something. So I'm getting better at it. And it does feel like a smooth learning curve where I'm getting better. I'm going to enjoy the game more and more, and I'll be able to challenge more challenging players more and more online, I think. So yeah.
Have you tried the competitive mode at all? Because I think that's the next kind of thing to go to if you want to improve yourself probably.
For online matches.
Yeah.
I think that's the one I tried where I met all those crazy guys.
Right, that's probably why.
Yeah, it was crazy. And anyway, stuff like the Samus car, the Mario and Luigi cars, they look great.
Some really cool things in
really
there.
cool.
Like customization is fun. I've because you can basically have different presets for your customization. So I made one that I called the Flaming Pigeon, which is like a car with flame decals on it and just a pigeon's head on top, like really stupid stuff. And yeah, so the thing where it comes to progression is a little weird because there are kind of loot boxes in this game, and it seems like the only way to open them is to pay for keys to open. And so sometimes you unlock those after matches. The one thing which makes it not too bad is no matter what happens in a match, after every match, you'll get something. Like you'll unlock a thing, whether it be a trail or a goal explosion or a skin, just something that helps you add to the customization of your car. And that's nice. It means that you're not getting frustrated when you lose, because honestly, like the points reward between winning and losing is pretty small. Like you get 750 for a loss and 1,000 for a win. And I think you may get bonuses dependent on how you score in the match, like how many points you get. It's an interesting system where it's like based on saves and like shots on goal and stuff. So yeah, I think they've got a good idea for progression in there that is not super based around like this loot box stuff, even though they've kind of added it in.
I like how you can't customize the Nintendo car. But there's one item you can get which is like the Game Awards trophy. It's sort of like it's almost like a bent over angel sort of thing.
Right, yeah.
And I like how it'd be funny if you could put that on like the Mario Kart as like, Mario Odyssey should win Game of the Year, and all this, and just by wearing it on the car. But Nintendo being like, nope, you can't customize Nintendo cars. We're not putting all these other things and country flags and like video game developers stickers on the cars. So
I made a really stupid car which is like a monster truck with like pink stars on it and a wizard's hat, and then it has the Indian flag as its thing. So it's like the dumbest fucking thing. But it's great that the game allows you like that flexibility to be stupid.
It's cool. And I enjoyed that. It's all aesthetic. It's none of it affects your cars, which is good.
The one thing I find a little hard to figure out is like the bulk and size of the car and how much that affects you.
How do they keep the hitboxes the same? Exactly.
Right,
I agree.
yeah.
I have no idea.
Because I was playing with the monster truck and it did feel slightly different from the car I was playing with before. Like because you have the streamlinedness of the Samus car, and so the monster truck does feel a bit different.
Okay.
So maybe there are differences there. It's hard for me to really say as someone who's not very familiar with how the game works. But I think the last thing I'll say about Rocket League is, even if you're bad at the game, which patently I am bad at the game, it's very clever in the way that when you get that one moment where everything aligns and you smash the ball through the air and you get an incredible goal, it feels amazing. Like there's this real fantastic satisfaction, not only in like, the rumble is great and stuff, but the explosion of the goal, how everyone flies out from it. There's some really good attention to detail paid in the animation department and the kind of sound department to make that achievement feel like a really great thing when you finally hit it.
And I feel like even if you're very bad at the game, the way that the game is made up, you can actually massively influence the game just from the smallest thing. And what I mean by this is the way that the corners, for example, are aligned. A lot of the time, the ball will run around the side, run around the corner, and then it'll just roll in front of the goal. And regardless of how good you are at making contact with the ball and getting it to go at the right angles and things like this, as long as you can just make sure your timing is right to charge at that ball when it's rolling in front of the opposition goal, you can score a goal even if you're not really good at the game. And like the skill comes from a lot of the other stuff and those things, but if you can get the basics right, you can still really make a difference to your team and win the match. And like that's a very satisfying thing to do that makes it more appealing to pick up and play.
Yeah, absolutely. I have, having said that, had multiple times where I just boost my way into the back of the goal and completely whiff on hitting it.
It's still tricky, but it's like a good first step.
Right, but I mean, that's where the satisfaction comes from,
Yeah.
is the one time where you do hit it and you're like, oh fuck yeah, that was awesome. I want them to try and implement the video recording feature as soon as possible into this game, because there have been some goals where I'm like, oh shit, that was awesome, but I can only take a screenshot right now, which is a little disappointing. But I'm sure they'll get there. I'm sure they'll keep adding and making this game better. And I think the one thing that we should say probably most of all is that this coming out now on the Switch is like, it's better than ever, because there are so many people playing it. It's still a very active community, and you have all these other modes which just didn't exist when the game launched. You know, like, it's just a much more varied, more wide variety of stuff that you have available to you right out of the box, which is just fantastic. So
NBZ,
yeah,
what numerous games have you been delving into?
Pretty much everything known to man. I picked up Danganronpa.
Getting that end of the year cramming in.
Yeah, basically, I wanted to play Danganronpa before the end of the year because I knew it was going to be something that I was going to like and going to be into.
Got Xenoblade coming up. That's the big one.
Yeah, that is the big one. So I'm like halfway through that. I'll talk about it maybe later. I've been playing a game called Flint Hook, which is like a roguelike game, which I'll maybe talk about a bit more next time. But the thing that I've been getting through the most is everyone's been talking about this Wolfenstein Valley. It's all over the place.
Sounds
People
cool.
are saying that new Colossus is doing some crazy stuff. And it's also a game that's coming to a Nintendo platform, which is the Switch next year, which is really weird. Like, how can I say that out loud? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
Should I pick up this game next year, MBZ?
I think absolutely, because it's the sort of thing that you don't really play, and it's the sort of thing that I think you will enjoy as someone who is new to kind of the first-person genre, and someone who likes storytelling in games. I think those are its strong suits. So the interesting thing is I actually played through The New Order, which was not the first Wolfenstein game. There have been like 50 billion Wolfenstein games.
Oh, have
but
there?
in terms of, it's a series that goes back. Its roots are in old PC gaming valley. Like almost the first first-person shooter ever was Wolfenstein 3D,
Wow.
and then after that was Doom, and they built on games like that afterwards. I don't know if you remember, but on the GBA they put out the original Doom.
Yes,
at
I
a
do.
point. I don't know if you remember playing any of it or on other people's GBAs, but I remember someone had it at school, and I remember seeing it and being like, oh, that's a really cool game. And so I do have a weird nostalgia for like those old PC shooters, because I did play some of them. Like, do you remember X versus Sever, that game?
Yes,
at all?
I do actually. Yeah.
So like
was that a re-release on GBA as well?
No, I think that was a new game
Okay.
that had come out, but it was essentially in the mold of a Doom and a Wolfenstein. I don't know. I think that was based on a movie or something, X versus Sever. I really can't remember, but it was for me, I definitely have some kind of nostalgic attachment. So there are some things that happen in The New Order which call back to that stuff, which I was like, oh my god, that's pretty awesome. There's similar stuff in New Colossus as well. But the interesting part about these two games is that they are first-person shooters, but I honestly view them much more as kind of action-adventure games, because there's a lot of shooting, but there are also a lot of quiet moments and a lot of contemplative moments where you're in your base and you're kind of walking around looking at the environment. There's a lot of environmental storytelling. You pick up notes, you're reading about the world and the state of it. And for people who don't know, the whole idea of Wolfenstein series is that the Nazis win the war, and that they have basically taken over, and you are BJ Blazkowicz, who is basically a rebel who's trying to take them down and destroy them and all this stuff. And so there are these areas where you're talking to characters, and a really big thing that I really like in New Colossus is there are often two characters who will just be standing around and be having a conversation with each other. So you're getting this environmental storytelling by just standing near them and listening to them and hearing what they say. And there's some really good stuff that comes out of that helps to build both those characters and also the state of the world around you and what their concerns are and all these different things that are going on. And there's also a section in The New Order which is almost like a puzzle solving section, which just really came out of nowhere. I was like, oh, that's interesting and weird. And and it wasn't the kind of thing I expected from this game, because going into it seems like, yeah, you're just, all the marketing for one thing is just based around just running and gunning and just destroying Nazis essentially, and that's really not, I mean, that is a lot of the game, but it's not what it focuses on, because it is very narratively driven. You are telling the story about how these resistance fighters take on the Nazis, and these characters are really well developed. They exceptionally acted. The mocap is fantastic, and for someone who is a meathead of a protagonist, BJ Blazkowicz has a lot of depth to him, and they really go deep on that in New Colossus, where there are these flashback scenes that kind of take you back to his childhood, and there are some just really amazing sequences that ground him as a character and make him feel like one of the kind of best first-person shooter protagonists I've ever played.
And he's a German.
No, he's an American.
He's American.
I imagine the name Blazkowicz is probably some Scandinavian descent. I don't know. I think there's probably something there that links him back to Europe in some way. I guess there are a lot of Americans who have European descent of some sort, right?
Oh,
so there's probably,
yeah.
Probably, I don't know what the backstory is there, but like for this character who used to just be a hand with a gun, in the early 90s, to now be a very fully realized, protagonist is pretty exceptional. I think they do just really great stuff with him, and his relationships with other people are just really fascinating. And there's a lot of weird and crazy stuff. And the one thing I think a lot of people have been criticizing about these two games is that they don't like the shooting, right? Like they're like, I don't really like the way this feels. It's not really satisfying. And I have felt pretty opposite to that. I actually really like it. And it may be because I'm playing on the easiest difficulty, because for me, I'm someone who is not great at single-player first-person shooters. I kind of play first-person shooters as if it's a multiplayer game the whole time, which means, like, I don't survive very long, right? When you're playing a multiplayer shooter,
right.
You're in there for maybe 2 minutes tops before someone takes you out. And so your mentality is very much speed and efficiency and just going through. And
your mouse and keyboard, right?
Yes, absolutely. I couldn't imagine playing this with a controller, honestly. Maybe that's why people are complaining, because a lot of people are playing on PS4. That's probably the reason. But for me, what it does is really combine the idea of sound and visuals to create a satisfying effect. And that is like when you're shooting a gun, you see the clippings just fly out at this crazy speed, and there's like flashes as you shoot, and you really feel the impact on the Nazis that you're just taking down. There are moments in corridors where you're just running, blitzing down there and just mowing them down in like complete ridiculous fashion. And in particular, I really like the shotgun in these games. They are incredibly satisfying. They just feel so heavy and weighty, and you just, when you get in close and you use that shotgun, it's an incredible feeling. So that's probably why I'm enjoying it, is because it's giving me that power fantasy level of like, I am playing as BJ Blazkowicz. BJ Blazkowicz is a badass. He's a fucking monster who is able to destroy Nazis and has no problem doing so. And I feel like if I were to play on a harder difficulty, or even just the normal difficulty, which people say is pretty tough, is pretty frustrating, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to the story they're trying to tell. Because the story they're trying to tell is this main character who is incredibly powerful and is just a force of destruction. So if I'm playing it on a hard difficulty, I'm not really getting that in a gameplay sense.
And then do it.
Exactly, right? Like, that's not who BJ Blazkowicz is. And so by playing through on easy, I think I'm actually embodying what the story wants the game to be, more so than anything else. And that's really been great, because he is just a force of nature, and you're switching between guns constantly, and just running around and taking down these robots as well. It's really fun on easy to just decimate people. It's just a really satisfying experience. And so maybe people who like first-person shooters will get satisfaction out of playing it on higher difficulties, but as someone who doesn't particularly find... So repetition when it comes to shooting mechanics is not something that I think is enjoyable. For me, when I play a hard platformer, I don't mind redoing stuff because I inherently love the mechanics of platforming.
Yeah,
I don't inherently love the mechanics of shooting guys. When I get through them, it's like, great, I just got through and I'm on to the next section. It feels, for me, the pacing is much more important in a game like Wolfenstein, not only because it's very narrative focused, but because for me, shooting just it's not my wheelhouse, right? And so I don't mind dying a million times in Super Meat Boy. In fact, that's the part of the game I love. Whereas in Wolfenstein, if I die a million times, I know I'm just going to get annoyed with it, right? I'm just going to get frustrated because those set of mechanics are not what I like the most. So that's what I've been doing. I've been charging my way through. I'm probably about halfway through the new Colossus. I finished the New Order, and so I have a good idea of the story and the characters. Honestly, the new Colossus is a massive step up, I think, in terms of storytelling. So for you, Bally, if you're going into this and you want to be caught up, they do a thing at the start where they kind of give you some backstory. I actually skipped it because I just literally finished playing the last game.
I like properly watching Let's Play. It's the sort of game where, I don't watch many Let's Plays, and it's such a narrative-driven game, and like you got the second one coming out on Switch, I might as well just properly go for it and maybe try and avoid the Wikipedia article.
Yeah, that makes sense, actually. Like, if you have the time to do so, if you find a good Let's Player who, can get through the game and you can watch it in a short amount of time. It's not a particularly long game. I think it took me about 7 hours for the first one, playing on easy. Obviously, it'll take longer if you're playing on a harder difficulty. I think there's even on YouTube just like, hey, here are the cutscenes of this game. So there's that as an option as well. There's important characters who carry over from the first game, and you see kind of the genesis of the relationship that BJ has with one particular character, which is kind of central to the entire story. So I think that it's probably important that you have some of that knowledge. But if you don't want to go and do it, I don't think it's, for people out there who are thinking about picking up Wolfenstein 2 on Switch, I don't think it's super necessary. You can jump in and have a good idea of what's going on without knowing every detail about everyone in this game. But yeah, so far loving it. I think it's a great thrill ride, and yeah, I definitely recommend it. And so when it comes out on Switch, I hope it's a good version. Cross our fingers. Doom is pretty good. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap us up for this segment of the show, but do not go anywhere. We'll be right back at you with some of your emails. See you in a bit.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. It's the second segment, and as usual for the second segment it is time for your emails. Very special request this time, as it's coming to the end of the year. That of course means it's time for Game of the Year discussions. Our next two shows before the end of the year, we are going to be talking about our games of the year. We want your games of the year. We want everything that you played this year that didn't have to come out this year, but also the games that also did come out this year. So anything and everything, we want it. Any platform, let us know what you've been playing this year, and we can feed some emails into some good discussions for the final two shows of the year. So our first email this week is from Robert C, who is from the internet. Hey MVZ and Bally, I must say that I am incredibly excited that Final Fantasy III is the next Backlog Club game. I don't have too many games in my own personal backlog, but this is one of them, and it's right up at the top. It's a game that I've been waiting for the right time to play, and well, you've made it the right time. Anyway, I thought it might be interesting if you guys could talk about the types of games that are on your own backlogs. Other than the obvious answer of there being too many other games to play, what is it that makes the games on your backlog take a back seat? How many old games are there versus new games? I have games on my list ranging from the NES all the way to the Switch. Even brand new games that I'm anxiously awaiting the release of sometimes go straight to my backlog for whatever reason. Would love to hear your thoughts. As always, thank you for making such a great podcast.
Thanks, Robert, for the email. Glad that you will be joining us in playing Final Fantasy 3/6. He said 3 in the email, of course, Bally. It's just confuse you even more.
Yeah, he just wants to confuse me some more, that's all.
Basically, there's the one reason why he said 3 is to confuse Bally, obviously. Yeah, so we've talked about backlog games a lot before, but I think this is an interesting take on it, is what takes priority? Like, when do you choose to take something out of the backlog and play it, and for what reasons? Do you have a system, Bally, that you go by that's
yes.
like, okay, there is a reason for why I'm playing this now versus later?
So I have a very strict system, and it's good to talk about this because it's such a big part of our show is our backlogs, and we talk a lot about historical Nintendo games especially, and games that we go back to that we might have missed or have just been we've bought ages ago, haven't played in a while, and we want to talk about on the show. So we should also mention that we use a website called backloggery.com where we log all of our games, and it actually took you a while to persuade me to use this website.
Took me
MBZ.
fucking forever to make you make an account.
Yeah, so
eventually...
eventually...
it was such a pain in the ass. I was like constantly, Bally, you're never going to remember what you play in the year. Come on, you're doing this podcast now, you got to do it. Come on,
exactly.
Get on there. And you're like, I've got to type them all in. And I will admit, the first time you go to the website, I wish they had better tools. I wish you could just like start typing in a game name and it would autofill. Hopefully they get there eventually, but you do kind of have to go out of your own volition and type everything in manually. So if you have a lot of games, it takes time, but it's worth it in the end, I think.
So yeah, I was persuaded to log all my games, which I did maybe a year after we started the podcast, and the games at that time were basically games from my childhood that I hadn't completed, that I have played a bit of almost all of them, but I hadn't actually beaten. So I put them all in the backloggery, I should say. I'm going to call it Backlog Club. That's a separate thing. And basically from there, it was a case of you saying, oh, Bally, this game's on sale. You should really pick it up. I'd pick it up. I'd play it. And then I would get bogged down in new releases clashing with the games that I was previously trying to play. This got a lot worse more recently, sort of in the last couple of years.
I think the end of last year where you got Pokemon Sun and you're playing Fire Emblem Conquest, I was like, Bally, and you started Majora's Mask. I'm like, Bally, what are you doing? Why are you starting all three of these games at the same time and you still haven't gone back to any of them? So.
Exactly. It was a mistake. They were all played for a bit and then put down, and I want to go back to all three of those games, and it's a real shame because... it's not a shame. 2017's been a stellar year, and I've been broadly playing new releases almost the entire time. There are some absolute great games that I have also played from my backlog that basically it's essentially games that go on sale that I feel like I want to play at some point but don't have the time to play at the time. I buy them and they go into my backlog essentially. So it's a combination of games from my childhood that I mean to go back to play, games on sale that I pick up at the time and mean to go back to play, and then sort of top tier new games that come out that for one reason or another get bogged down by other new releases. A game like Pokemon Sun, like Fire Emblem Fates Conquest, that I played at the time when they came out but only played very briefly and then had to put them away again, which was a real shame. But I do want to get back to those. But those are my sort of three main categories. In terms of going back to those categories and picking up what I want to play, I do try and mix it up. Like if I've just played a really long RPG, I might be more keen to look at my backlog and think, oh, let's play a shorter platformer or something, and like just trying to mix it up again. I don't want to just be talking about one style of game all the time on the show is the other thing. So having my backlog is a really nice way of saying, I've talked a lot about one thing on the show recently in the last few months. Let's pick this game to play for next episode, and I'll play that and beat that and do some notes and talk about it on the show. So that's sort of how my backlog has evolved. And as I say, this year's just been so full of new games that the backlog has been reached more seldom than normal. And that's what's interesting, is that we do our top 10 games of the year that didn't come out this year. So that's and those are almost all backlog games by and large. So that's sort of what we're going to talk about next show. So it's just a big part of the show, and I think that is basically a broad layout of how I operate. MBZ, your backlog is somewhat larger than mine. I should say mine's currently sitting on 32. And I genuinely
think somewhat larger is a bit of an understatement.
Right, yours is at least 3 times larger, and you've already culled numerous games, whereas I've culled a handful, don't get me wrong, from some very old games that I just have no interest in going back to. But those 32, many of which are Super Nintendo games for the Super Nintendo Classic, I do want to go back to and beat. So, yeah.
So my system is a little more based
Haphazard.
on... Well, no, not really haphazard. So a lot of it is mood, and a lot of it is how I feel at the time, and like, do I want to play this right now? But a lot of it is kind of coinciding with what is new and what is happening, right? So this week is a good example because I wanted to play Wolfenstein II, but before I did that, I knew that I had Wolfenstein: The New Order sitting in my Steam library, which I should have shouted this out during the segment, but shout outs to Kevin Sharma, friend of the show, for gifting me New Order like last year, and I told him, like, I'm going to get to this by the end of the year, I'll tell you what, and I did, so there you go, I'm a man of my word, but the idea that I'm playing the game...
You've still not broken your Switch, though.
Well, you know, you will get to that. Xenoblade it's not out yet. It's only a week. It could still get delayed, Valley. Oh boy. So in a situation like that, I wanted to play the first game before I played the second game. So even though we're in a place where like there's a lot of things, like Rocket League is happening and Mario Odyssey is happening, I put those aside for a second to play through something like the New Order, because it will help inform my opinion of the new Colossus, right? Like, that's important to me, is to go into that experience having the previous experience. Then you also have the experience of earlier this year I played through Persona 3 Portable, and the reason for that was I knew Persona 5 was coming out, and I knew that Persona 5 would really change things up and make it so it would be even harder to go back to Persona 3 later down the line. So I kind of wanted to get it out the way before it was too hard to go back to. And it turned out that I think Persona 3 is kind of too hard to go back to anyway, but I think it was good to have played that game and gotten it done before the new one comes out. So there are situations like that which happens not necessarily super frequently, but they happen often enough to where it informs my decision of what I want to play. And then there's obviously new releases, which I tend to try and play as soon as possible, as soon as I get them. There are times when something will slip to the side, but usually it slips to the side if it's a new release of the year that I've gotten in a sale. So for example, I got both Hollow Knight and Cosmic Star Heroine in the Steam sale in the summer. I played Hollow Knight straight away, but I left Cosmic Star Heroine for a while to like wait until I had a window where I thought, hey, this is a good place for me to play this now, and then I played it then. So it is kind of ebbs and flows, and it depends again on like what is a long game that I'm playing that I need a short game, and sometimes like something random will just happen where, especially in the first year of the Switch, where I hadn't played a lot on it for the first few months, and I was in a situation where I was away from my desktop, I didn't have access to my PS4, so my Switch was like my main thing I was playing, and something like Mighty Gunvolt Burst just pops up on the Switch shop, and I'm like, okay, I'll play that now because I want to play something on my Switch, and I don't have something else right now to play on Switch aside from Zelda, which I put 100 hours into, so that happens, and you know, I didn't intend to buy that at the start of the year or put it into my backlog, but it just kind of happened. And yeah, it's a fine balancing act, I think, of like deciding what has priority and what doesn't. But for the most part, if a game has been sitting there for a very long time, it's hard for me to be like, okay, this is the opportunity to do it, especially in 2017, because there's just so much other stuff happening. I've had Batman Arkham Asylum sitting in my Steam library for God knows how long. It's a game that I started on PS3 back in 2011 when I got my PS3 for the first time. I played the first like 2 hours of it, really liked it, and then just never went back to it, and I've just not had a reason to go back to it anytime soon. So that's something that I'll eventually correct, but it's like, I don't know when is the time for me to play that. It just doesn't seem like there's an opportunity ever. So
and I think that as intense as 2017 has been, like I think 2018 is going to be a great year. There's some great games lined up. Surely 2018 is not going to be quite as intense, surely. I mean, it could be. Not. It could be. And maybe 2019 might be as well. But I think that 2017 is unusual. I certainly played a ton of backlog games from like in 2016. And like we said, like so much stuff has come out this year. Long games as well. And I think that 2018 might be an opportunity where I can go back and maybe play a few more older games.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's always nice to dip back into this question, because I think we have touched on it in the past, but it's
a slightly different angle, though. Like prioritizing.
It's definitely a big
when.
part of the show. So that's the inner workings, and definitely check out backloggery.com if you don't use it, and if
they don't sponsor us.
They don't sponsor us, but they really should.
I welcome any sponsorship, though. So
you can literally see every single game MBZ and I have lined up in our backlogs if you want to stalk us. So
yes, you can do that. Stalking is great.
On to our next question, which is from Alan L, who's from Texas. Hi MBZ and Bally. First, thank you for the years of Nintendo content that you've provided. I really appreciate your viewpoints on Nintendo games, and I look forward to hearing TNL's podcast discussion for Game of the Year 2017. I suspect you'll have a hard time deciding which game wins based on your difference of opinion. I'll probably side with Bally. Sorry, MBZ. My question I'd like to hear from you is to discuss this. Nintendo seems hell-bent on incorporating motion control into Switch games. I think Wii-style motion control needs to die a respectful death so we can all move on from that glorious chapter of innovation. Maybe this is harsh, but I fear that shoehorning these waggle motions into games like Super Mario Odyssey and Skyrim pigeonhole Nintendo as the gimmick game creators rather than the innovators they want the game-buying public to view them as. What do you think? Is waggle here to stay as an ongoing option in controlling, or will it find its graveyard the same way 3D with the new 2DS XL? P.S. I will play all of my 3DS games on my new 3DS XL with the 3D slider all the way up. Thanks again for all the great work that you produce.
So, Bally, it's the ultimate question. Did Nintendo ever let go of their baby that needs to die with the gimmicky motion controls?
I think that when the Switch was first revealed in that trailer, I think we thought it was dead. Like, I think that, like, I don't think many people would have gambled on those on the Joy-Cons having, you know, anything motion related in them. And then it wasn't until that Japanese press conference where 1-2 Switch was revealed, and everyone was like, yep, Nintendo can't resist going back to the motion controls. And I think that as we've learned more and more about a game like Mario Odyssey, and people had to play at events without the grip, it was like Joy-Cons with separated hands, I think a lot of people were like, why are we doing this? Can we not just play Mario with a regular gamepad? And it just feels like it is something that they cling onto, and it really feels that we have moved on in terms of the audience of the Switch from the Wii era, where it might be more appealing and more important to incorporate motion controls into a game in order to make it appeal to a wider audience. I just don't see the Switch appealing to that same market, so the need to incorporate motion controls seems pointless, but they still seem to want to do it, and that's what I don't understand.
I think there is a benefit to having motion controls on Switch for the simple fact that there is the opportunity available to backwards compatible, introduce Wii games again.
Yeah, but I mean, that's not really a thing that's going to reach to a wide audience and sell more Switches necessarily.
It's not, but it's something that I think Nintendo are concerned with, is like having access to their older games still, and whether they do that via a virtual console system with Wii games included, that's neither here nor there at the moment, because they're just being stum on the whole matter. But there are benefits to the technology that's within the Joy-Cons, I think. I'm a big fan of slight gyro-assisted aiming in Breath of the Wild, and I know you play Splatoon with gyro controls, so there are parts of the motion control puzzle which fit together very well in some of Nintendo's games. But then you have something like Mario Odyssey, where it is just completely pointless, and I know you've had issues where you're trying to get a moon.
I posted on Twitter.
And you're jumping with the frog, and it's high, and you jump, and you're like, how do I get there? Like, even jumping with Mario out of the frog to get an extra boost seems really hard.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. If there are lots of like very good Mario Odyssey players out there who have figured out ways to get all these moons without needing motion controls. It is possible. You just need to be very good. But the idea is that Nintendo want you to use the motion control to get this moon, and there's no other way to really do it. And that sucks, because playing in handheld mode, it just isn't. It doesn't work. It's just a pain in the ass. Like, you can't be on the subway throwing your freaking thing around like your entire handheld. It's just completely absurd that they expect that, and the fact they didn't build in options to circumvent it is pretty silly, honestly. It's adding absolutely nothing. Like, making that stuff gesture-based doesn't achieve the same thing as making Splatoon motion controls gyro-based, because in that example, you are gaining something. You are having something tangible which makes the experience better. In this scenario, it does nothing that a button couldn't do. And I think that's where you have to draw the line, is as soon as it becomes something that is more efficient and better achieved with just hitting a button, that's when you shouldn't be implementing it into the game in the first place.
Exactly.
There's one other argument that I could side with, which is an interesting one, is that Nintendo really streamlined the controls of Mario Odyssey to where it's essentially a 3-button game. You have your jump, you have your cap throw, and you have your ground pound. And any combination of those 3 moves in succession gives you an extensive list of verbs that Mario can perform, whether it be the long jump onto the cap into a dive, whether it be a ground pound jump into a wall jump. Like, they all link together in a very simple way where you're only using 3 buttons. And so maybe people could make the argument that if you added more buttons in there, it would lose some of that beautiful simplicity that Nintendo have designed. But why not give them the option in the first place? You know, there are some players who don't need that simplicity and who can get their head around having more than 3 buttons to contend with. And I know they're designing for an audience that has maybe sometimes a harder time with things like 3D movement and platformers. So having 3 buttons that you only rely on is something that is an admirable thing to do. But it doesn't make sense when you could have these other buttons that are sitting there doing the exact same thing as the other 2 buttons, you know?
Yep.
Like, 2 of the face buttons just do the same thing as the other 2 face buttons. And it's kind of nonsensical, honestly.
It's strange. And I think you're absolutely right with stuff like Splatoon 2. It's just works really great and it's seamless. And you're right that if you can replace it with a button, why do it at all? But, you know, stuff like Zelda, that aiming is really great. It's so useful. Do you think if another Mario game comes to Switch, sort of Odyssey 2, Galaxy 2 style, do you think they'll just keep it in?
Yeah, because they're stubborn. That's the thing with Nintendo more than all, is that they're just stubborn about a lot of this stuff. And until it proves financially beneficial for them to change their mind about it, I'm not sure that they see the imperative to do so. It doesn't really, when you have the engine built and you have all that stuff set up already, if you're doing a sequel, you would just leave them in. And I don't know if they want to do the extra legwork to try and, you know, make it work better. It's difficult because honestly, like, we praise Nintendo a lot for their innovation, and they do some great things. But
they are so stubborn.
but like, some of those innovations are not really innovations. They're just things that they throw in there where they want to make games different. And I appreciate that they want to make games different, but sometimes you make games different at the detriment of the game itself. Like, a lot of people were very frustrated with Star Fox Zero for that exact reason. And I know you really enjoyed that game, and I don't know how much that was to do with the controls, but, you know...
it was a big part. I did enjoy it.
Yeah. So I don't know if there are any people out there who really love Mario Odyssey's motion controls. There are probably some people, but for me, honestly, it's just not... It doesn't make sense. And... as long as the Switch is around, as long as that console is their main thing, I don't think they're going to be able to resist using it in some way. I mean, they probably had the conversation with Bethesda to get them to put the motion controls in the game. I doubt Bethesda were clawing at Nintendo saying, "Oh, Nintendo, we've got to put these motion controls in." That's a business decision that was made from the other side, I think.
Nintendo like, we'll offer you the Breath of the Wild costume, and Bethesda like, great, that sounds... And they're like, there's one caveat to us giving you Breath of the Wild costume. You got to put in the motion control. And they were like, oh, well, I guess it's Zelda and it's important, so let's do it. So, shake of hands and they're feeling guilty, and then you get Skyrim out with
and yet they don't put motion controls into Doom, which is absurd. Like, that's a game which would benefit greatly, especially for a Nintendo audience who have gotten so used to aiming in a shooter like Splatoon with motion. The fact that they wouldn't put motion control in Doom, which is tangibly beneficial to the experience, versus Skyrim, where you're swinging a fucking sword around that actually has no like design element that was thought out for that system. It boggles the mind sometimes, the decisions they make in terms of these different games. But
it's weird.
It's Nintendo. That's partially why we love them so much, is because they're dumb idiots. And
Alan, I don't think they're going to change anytime soon. So I think you're going to be waggling for some years to come, I think is the answer.
For the moment.
That is all we have time for this segment, for your listener emails. And as I said at the top of the segment, please send in your emails with your Game of the Year suggestions, your top picks, your nominations. We want them. Everything that came out this year, and just games that you have been playing this year. All platforms, we want them all. Because, of course, the next two shows, we are going to be talking about your games of the year, and our games of the year, I should say, for the show. So, on to the third segment, we will be talking about the Game Awards, so don't go anywhere.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the third and final part of the show. This week we're going to be discussing the Video Game Awards, called the Game Awards, I guess, TGAs now. They used to be the VGAs, which was a dark, terrible era in which television executives thought they knew best for the video game industry, and they would invite celebrities, and it was just an awful train wreck of a mess. I never really watched those back in the day. I don't know if you ever saw any of the VGXs.
No. What channel were they on?
They weren't on a British channel ever. I think they were on G4 in the US,
right.
Which was their big like video games based thing there. But they never really... I think they might have been streamed in the later parts. I think the year when Reggie was wearing the Metroid pin, when they unveiled Cranky Kong, was the only time I watched it, and that was the year before it turned into the Game Awards.
I thought that was the first year of the Game Awards.
No, that was the year before. That was that was the last VGX, as it was known back in the day. That was where they actually unveiled No Man's Sky for the first time, as it would become infamous thereafter. But lots of interesting things happen around the Game Awards. I think generally they've gotten better over the years. It's improved. Last year I wasn't as hot on it. I didn't think it was as good a show. But Keeley is talking up a big game for this year. He says that there are some big reveals coming, some exciting stuff. So looking forward to it, and hopefully there'll be some good stuff. But this segment, Bally, is to go through the nominations and basically choose for each category what we would like to win personally and what we think is going to win. Two very different choices, of course, because our personal taste is probably different to a lot of the judges who are voting. And this all these awards, I think 10% of them are fan voted. 90% of the share of the decision goes on to a group of judges, which is different gaming outlets from IGN to Polygon to Easy Allies to Giant Bomb to Kind of Funny. So a good broad selection. So we're just going to roll on through these. Starting from the bottom, we're basically going upwards, so we build up to the Game of the Year, because it seems a bit weird to just start there and kind of burst it straight away. So we'll start with Best Esports Game. We're skipping a few categories. Best Esports Game, the nominees are Counter-Strike, Dota 2, League of Legends, Overwatch, and Rocket League. Bally, what do you make of this list?
It's cool, yeah. I mean, I've just been talking about Rocket League, and I love it, and I haven't played any of the other games, and from what I've seen and like the whole community and the idea behind the Dota 2 and stuff like League of Legends really doesn't appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised. I didn't even know Counter-Strike was really still a thing, so that's interesting.
Dude, Counter-Strike Global Offensive has been enormous. It's still enormous. That game's been around. I remember we used to play some Counter-Strike when we were at school, like on laptops, like local area network. I was awful at it all the time. I never did well. But yeah, Counter-Strike's still huge, man. It's crazy.
I mean, obviously, I'd like Rocket League to win. What I think will win, I don't know. Isn't Dota 2 and League of Legends now? Why 2017 in particular? I would imagine it would be one of the other, either Counter-Strike or Overwatch.
Well, because esports games are just games that never end. That's the thing with them, right? Like they are
that
evergreen.
Makes me think, what's the point in this award if they just keep going? Like,
yeah.
I don't know. It feels strange, but
it is a little weird. I guess it's dependent on like which one was most popular in the year.
Like, what's the best sport of the year? It's like, well, sport always goes on, so why would there be specifically a good sport?
You're right. Yeah, it kind of is like, hey, is cricket better than football sort of thing. It's a little weird.
Particularly this year, cricket was better than football.
I don't know. I mean, to some degree that makes sense in terms of like if you're coming from the British perspective, like which team was doing better. But this is more of a global vote, so again, it is slightly strange.
I'll predict Dota 2. Why not?
Okay. Well, yeah, that's kind of my read on this. Is I think the types of people who watch the Game Awards are the types of people who are voting for this kind of thing, and to me, the type of person who is voting for this kind of thing is more the kind of person who plays Overwatch than they are someone who plays Dota or League of Legends. Just because I think that sort of game is more in the sphere of a fan who follows this stuff. So I would both like Overwatch to win, and I also think Overwatch is going to win. So that's my prediction there. Moving on, we have the trending gamer of the year, in which we have the nominees are Andrea Renee from What's Good Games, Clint Lexer, Half Coordinated, Guy Beam, Dr. Disrespect, Mike Grzizk, I can't say that name, Shroud, and Steven Spoon from Able Gamers. I know you don't have a huge knowledge of who most of these people are.
Yeah, I really don't know these people. I know of Andrea Renee, and
yes,
she's okay. I don't think she's.
We've known of Andrea Renee for a long time because she's on Weekend Confirmed back in the day.
She's fine. Like, I don't think she's incredibly. I don't know. She's not that interesting. So I don't know if she's.
Wow, savage burn. Savage burn.
I don't mean to be savage. But I'm surely it will be one of the other people.
Let me let you in on a secret, listeners, should I say, or maybe listener, because most people just are the only person listening to this on their own. Andrea Renee sometimes doesn't like Nintendo stuff, and so Bali is just very mad about that. Basically, it's what it boils down to.
You're allowed to not like Nintendo, but it has to be for the right reasons.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Any choices here that you think, or that you?
I have no idea. I'll pass.
Okay, fair enough. I think Andrea's going to win for the simple fact that she does Kind of Funny Games Daily
and the Nintendo
World Championships.
That's the one. She hosted that.
I don't think that's going to get her to win. The reason I think she's going to win is because you have the Kind of Funny audience who are very dedicated, and they're the people who took Greg Miller to a win when he was up against PewDiePie and all these other giants. And that's the reason why I made the comment about Overwatch, is because sure, you have people like Dr. Disrespect on this list, who is an enormous streamer, enormously popular Battleground streamer. If he was to mobilize his audience and say, vote for me, he would win without even having to breathe, right? But the thing is, most of these people don't live in this sphere. They don't live in the kind of Game Awards sphere, which is all about playing a wide variety of games and knowing the industry and knowing who Giant Bomb is versus Easy Allies versus IGN, right? Those people are the kind of people who play their one game on Twitch and they don't really know what's going on in the industry. So despite the fact that Dr. Disrespect has a massive audience, if he doesn't mention this to people and he doesn't say, hey, I'm nominated, vote for me, then he's not going to win, because most people don't follow him on this side of the industry. So that's why I think Andrew's going to win. I would kind of like Steven Spoon to win, honestly, because Able Gamers is a very cool charity. It's a very well-focused one that is all about helping disabled players play video games with controllers that are made specially for them and that stuff. So I think that would be a nice kind of in the what the fuck am I saying? In the climate of 2017, it would be nice to have something positive like that win.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to the most anticipated game, which is basically a hype award for who has the best marketing, which I think is very stupid, but regardless. We have God of War.
Zelda won last year.
Marvel Spider-Man, yes, it did. Monster Hunter World, Red Dead Redemption 2, and The Last of Us Part 2.
It's got to be Marvel Spider-Man. That game is just hot.
That's what you're looking forward to.
I'm really looking forward to that, like seeing what people think about it. I feel like the Red Dead Redemption 2 trailer, people liked it, but I think maybe the hype for that was a bit overblown versus how people felt after the trailer. I've not actually seen The Last of Us Part 2 trailer yet, but I know that a lot of people were quite keen on that. Monster Hunter World, probably not. And then God of War, I mean, aren't we past the peak of that hype, I guess? I don't know.
Well, God of War is reinventing itself, you know? Yeah. Like, there's a lot of differences going on there.
I mean, we've known about that game for a lot. It feels like we've known that.
Right.
I guess we have known about Spider-Man a long time, but I think we've seen a lot more of Spider-Man more recently, whereas God of War we've saw quite a while ago, so maybe if it's most anticipated, it's maybe not as anticipated as it once was.
Maybe, but it's also one of those games that is probably coming out sooner rather than later, whereas I think Spider-Man's probably a little bit on the later end.
Okay.
I think that to win here will probably be Last of Us, honestly. There's something about that fan base and about the this is, you know, a voted awards, and I think there's a very dedicated kind of portion of the audience that are going to go for that game. I think for me, it's a toss-up between Red Dead and Spider-Man, honestly. I like the Spider-Man world, and I like when we played Spider-Man 2 on GameCube, that was always a great fun time. But Red Dead Redemption is the only Rockstar game I've actually beaten and enjoyed enough of the story to go through and finish. Like, the usual idea with me with Rockstar games is I just piss around with GTA and never really do anything because I'm never interested in the story. And Red Dead is very, very good with that stuff. It's an excellent game, and I'm interested to see what they do. So yeah. So let's move on to categories that maybe interest us a little more. Starting with Best Debut Indie Game, a hot category.
This is a hot list.
So this, I believe, are games that are all the first game from a studio, and they are indie games, of course. So we have Cuphead, Golf Story, Hollow Knight, Mr. Shifty, and Slime Rancher. Those first three are incredibly good games, right. All three of them. How do you feel about this one, Bally?
Well, I obviously love Golf Story. I've not played the others. I've heard great things from you about both Hollow Knight and Cuphead. I know that Hollow Knight is coming to Switch. I'm definitely going to play that game. You never know. Cuphead might eventually come to Switch. That would be cool.
Microsoft didn't publish it, so it's open to possibility.
There is hope. Slime Rancher. I saw like a quick look earlier in the year. It just didn't look like it was weird. It was interesting.
Yeah,
it was sort of like first person Harvest Moon style game. It's a bit strange. Mr. Shifty, I've completely forgotten like what that is and
it was a big kind of indie game at the start of the Switch's kind of launch cycle. It's kind of like a Hotline Miami game, but you can like warp around the place, kind of like Nightcrawler. So like top down kind of shooting game. I don't think Mr. Shifty has a shout. What do you think is going to win?
I would like Golf Story to win. I know it's not going to win just because I think there's a lot more hype maybe behind games like Hollow Knight and Cuphead. Golf Story is much more of a surprise perhaps than those, but if they were talking about best debut indie game, it has to be Cuphead, surely. Yeah,
Cuphead's going to win this, no doubt, in my mind. I really struggle to choose, actually, between Hollow Knight and Cuphead. I think both are phenomenal games. I actually think I would like Hollow Knight to win, if only for the fact that it's one of those games that really no one talked about this year, and yet it did pretty well for itself. I think it sold over 500,000 copies on Steam. So like word of mouth worked incredibly effectively for that game when most of the industry wasn't really covering it that much, surprisingly so. And I've been listening to some podcasts, like End of the Year podcast now, and it seems like a lot of people are trying to catch up on Hollow Knight at this point in time because they've heard stuff about it, and it's finally getting to them. So it would be nice, but I think Cuphead is a lock, and fair enough, because Cuphead's fucking amazing. Next up, Best Multiplayer. Call of Duty World War II, Destiny 2, Fortnite, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe.
Weird.
Okay. PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds and Splatoon 2.
I like Splatoon 2, but I've heard incredible things about PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds. I think obviously there's controversy in one sense, and it's in another few awards, PUBG, but is about that it's a beta and that it's arguably not a full game. Should it be nominated? I I might even side with like it shouldn't be nominated, but if it is here, I think it's almost definitely going to win just because of the amount people are talking about this game and how different it is from previous. It's unique. It's interesting.
Yeah.
So I like Splatoon 2, but I almost wouldn't want to see it win just because, like we've talked about on the show, how it doesn't change up enough, perhaps from the first game. It's still a very good game, but like if you're talking about best multiplayer game of 2017, it's surely got to be PUBG.
Yeah, the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe thing I just need to talk about for a second, because what the fuck? Why are you putting a remastered game in an award show like this?
Yeah,
that seems strange to me.
Some would say Splatoon 2 is a remastered game.
Well, in all but name.
Right.
Well, honestly, like they just dropped a massive update for Splatoon 2 that adds a bunch of new stuff, and they've also announced there's going to be a new ranked mode, which I'm very excited about. So Splatoon 2 continues to break out into its own thing, I think, and I pretty much side with you. I think where I would choose Splatoon 2 myself, but PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds is undoubtedly going to win. Next up,
Destiny.
Best Sports. God damn it, Destiny. You know what? A lot of the games industry press were very wrapped up in Destiny, so if that wins, I wouldn't be surprised. But anyway, moving on to Best Sport/Racing Game. FIFA, Forza, Motorsport 7, Gran Turismo Sport, NBA 2K18, Pro Evolution Soccer 2018, and Project Cars 2. This is my least favorite category, I think.
have no idea. I've never played any of these games, really. I like a good driving game. Why don't we go for Forza? I'd like that.
Yeah, I mean, Forza, I know Jeff Gersman wasn't super hot on it.
It's like the top arcadey. It's Xbox exclusive, right? It's sort of like the number one arcade style.
Well, the Forza 7 is not arcadey at all. It's the
really?
Forza Horizon series, which is the arcadey version. This is the main sports series, which is just like Gran Turismo. It's like a much more mainline racing game.
It's hardcore, that stuff. I don't know if it's... Yeah,
I've never been into that stuff. It's tough to get into. I had a racing wheel on PS1 with Gran Turismo 2, and I just couldn't. I never got my head around that game.
Yeah, I remember watching you struggle.
It was real bad. I'm really bad at that stuff. I think this is really difficult because I think there's been controversy around Forza and Gran Turismo, and
it's to do with unlocking cars and prices and stuff, right?
And then like NBA obviously is involved in the never-ending loot box scandal of 2017, so that has no fucking chance in hell. I'm just gonna go Project Cars 2 because it seems like the kind of like not out of nowhere, but the kind of more indie darling thing here. So I'm gonna go for that for both, honestly, because I think that might end up doing quite well.
Sure.
Best strategy game, very weird category because lots of mixing of strange things in here.
It's Fire Emblem.
Yeah, that's the one thing I really don't like is that they never nominate any 3DS games outside of the one category for 3DS games, and it kind of drives me insane.
It's like and the best baby game of the year.
Yeah, basically, it's like fuck off, mate. Like I know people like Halo Wars 2, but Shadows of Valentia is better than Halo Wars 2 in my book. Anyway, that's a stupid thing to say because I've not played Halo Wars 2, so sorry. Being a bit of a fanboy here, I can't help myself. I'll usually leave that to Bally, but it comes out every now and again.
Just want a bit of representation. That's
sure, a little bit. So we've got Halo Wars 2, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, Total War, Warhammer, Tooth and Tail, and XCOM 2 War of the Chosen, which is an expansion, so it's kind of cheating, but whatever.
Weird.
How do you feel about this category, Bally?
I know very little about most of these games, but Mario and Rabbids look really cool, so...
Yeah. Hey, guess what? We're a Nintendo podcast. Did you think we were going to vote for Mario plus Rabbids? Yeah. Guess what? You're right. I also think Mario plus Rabbids will just win, because it has a broader appeal, and I think most of the people who aren't into strategy games, but who are voting on these awards, are going to vote for it because they probably took a chance on it.
And it came out at a time when, like, it was sort of like the big game of the month for the Switch at that point in time, so I feel like a lot of people definitely played it. And
right, it was in a prime position.
Yeah, and it went down really well, so it probably will win.
Next up, the Nintendo category, otherwise known as Best Family Game. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, Sonic Mania, Splatoon 2, and Super Mario Odyssey.
Here's the problem. Like, in the past, it feels like they have tried to share around awards. And
it's hard to share around awards, though, because this is voted by a bunch of different outlets. And unless all of them have the viewpoint of sharing around awards, then I don't know that it necessarily happens.
But, I mean, they will reach that conclusion based on the discussion, not like a blind ballot, surely.
Right,
so, like, there is a chance that they could share around the awards. And, like, maybe we could point out, like, games like Cuphead, for example, are nominated 5 times. Destiny 2, Horizon, Zelda, Mario are all nominated 6 times. So there's a huge chance that they could pick up multiple awards. So when you're sort of listed in Best Family Game, something like Super Mario Odyssey, which is in contention for loads of other awards, I feel like maybe this isn't its time to shine, and that a game like something like Sonic Mania, it might be the best category for that game, for example.
Yeah, but when you're saying like discussing around, do you mean between the different outlets? Because that doesn't happen. Like, this is the different outlets on their own will independently choose and then put their votes into a ballot, basically.
Oh, you think it's just votes into a ballot? You don't think
that's how it works. It's like Giant Bomb chooses the winner, they'll send in their ballot for the winner. Easy Allies chooses their winner, they'll send in their ballot. That's how it works, Bally.
Okay. If that's the case, then I guess a lot of games are going to pick up a ton of awards.
Yeah, maybe. I think Odyssey will just win it because it's the best game out of those 5 games, and it's weird because like you're trying to think, okay, well, it's best family game, so maybe Mario Kart has a shot, but also like it seems kind of lame to reward Mario Kart because it's just a fucking remaster of a Wii U game. Why are re-releases getting in here anyway? I don't know. Somehow Nintendo they must be giving Keighley a good trailer or something, because something's up. In any case, next up is Best Fighting Game, which we can go over quickly. ARMS, Injustice 2, Marvel vs. Capcom, Nidhogg 2, and Tekken 7.
I'm really intrigued by Nidhogg 2. I'd love that to come to Switch. It's not announced yet, is it?
And that seems like the outlier in this discussion, because it's not strictly a fighting game. You know, it's got a weird twist to it.
Yeah.
I think I'd choose that one as well.
Yeah, I mean, ARMS didn't strike well with many people, so I can't see that get winning. And Nidhogg does something interesting. It's cool. I think Injustice 2, like, it's mainly cool for like what it does to that universe rather than like how good of a fighting game it is from everything I've read and seen. So I'd go Nidhogg 2, both what I want and I think might win.
It could be a dark horse here. I think it's between Injustice 2 and Tekken 7, honestly. I think both those games have
People did like Injustice, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of people like Tekken 7, like surprisingly so. It sold very well, and people were very positive about it in reviews, so I think that might be the one that takes it. Next up, we have Best Role-Playing Game. Divinity Original Sin 2, Final Fantasy 15, Nier Automata, Persona 5, and South Park: The Fractured But Whole. I
have very little opinion on these games. You say a lot of great stuff about Persona 5. If I was going to try a game in this list, it would definitely be Persona, followed by probably Final Fantasy 15. Obviously, Nier is like this huge game that came out this year that I know so little about, so I really should brush up on that. But I think Persona could win this.
Yeah, it's possible. I wouldn't count out the dark horse of Nier, though. I think Nier is definitely... It's a thing that some people are so passionate about, in a sense that is kind of crazy. So I think that is the one that is the dark horse, but I think Persona 5 is probably the likely winner. And I think, unfortunately, Divinity Original Sin 2 has just been overlooked. That game has scored ridiculously well, with a lot of people calling it one of the best like computer role-playing games ever made. So it's kind of tragic that it was released in a year where it's surrounded by so much competition, because it's just been left to the side, unfortunately. Next, we have Best Action Adventure, which is Assassin's Creed Origins, Horizon Zero Dawn, Super Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, and Uncharted: The Lost Legacy. This is a weird category, I think, because putting Mario Odyssey in Best Action Adventure doesn't sound right.
Game definitions generally are just horrible, and
we were having this conversation before about like genres being kind of outdated at this point, and the fact that Game Awards just still clings to them is slightly
does Mario
weird.
Have action in it? Does it have adventure in it? To some degree, but so does every single other game almost on this list.
Right, yeah,
like on all these lists, I should say. So I don't know. Like, are we talking about what's the best at action and adventure, or what's the best game in the category?
Yeah, that's a tough part.
I don't know. It's got to be Zelda. I think Zelda's going to win a host of awards. I think it's the best game on this list. I think I want it to win, and I think it will win. Yep.
Let's just tick the Zelda box and move on. Best action game: Cuphead, Destiny 2, Neo, Prey, and Wolfenstein II: The New Colossus.
My theory of like sharing awards around, it'd be nice if Wolfenstein picked this one up, but I think it would probably be Cuphead.
I think this is a tough one for sure. That's definitely, I think the idea that Wolfenstein came out quite recently also lends to its benefit. Like, that just tends to happen because it's fresher in people's minds. But But again, a lot of people have been kind of complaining about the action part of Wolfenstein. You know, like people don't necessarily like the shooting that much in that game. So that's where I think it may be held down. I would say Cuphead for me personally, and also I think Cuphead has a good shot of winning, but we will see. Next up is the best VR/AR game. I don't know if any of these games are actually AR games, so I don't know why they've included that in the name of the award. But there's Farpoint, Lone Echo, Resident Evil 7, Star Trek Bridge Crew, and Superhot VR.
I know very little about almost all these games. I've heard a lot about Star Trek Bridge Crew for sure. I think that sounds like an incredible VR experience that I really want to try at some point. We need to get to a convention, Emmy said. It's as simple as that. Let's do
or
it
just buy VR headsets.
Sorry?
Or just buy VR headsets, but that requires a lot of money.
Come down in price, and I don't know.
Hey, if our Patreon takes off, then maybe.
Who knows?
I think that Resident Evil 7 is going to win this just because it's the most popular AAA big game. I would like Superhot VR to win because everything I've heard about that game and the things I've seen, holy shit, that looks fucking cool. Like, I really want you to play Superhot VR, Bally, because it seems like something that would, like, definitely, in a similar vein to what we did when we were at Gamescom, it seems like, because it's a, like, standstill sort of experience, where you're, like, dodging and moving and stuff, I think it would work really well, and I want to try it myself.
Yeah,
so.
definitely.
Next up is the aforementioned best handheld game category, in which every 3DS game ever released in 2017 is a part of it. We have Ever Oasis, Fire Emblem Echo Shadows of Valentia, Metroid Samus Returns, Monster Hunter Stories, and Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World. Again, another re-release. What's up with this shit? Nintendo getting away with murder.
I would be shocked if any of these outlets have played Poochie and Yoshi's Woolly World.
Maybe.
So I think it has to be Samus Returns. I know Fire Emblem is a very, very good... That's a very good Fire Emblem from everything.
It's an excellent game, yes.
Definitely, but I think that long wait for 2D Metroid, and it finally came, and it was actually a really good game. So I think I want it to win, and I think it will win.
Yeah, I agree. I love Echoes. I think it's a really great Fire Emblem game, but I think I like Samus Returns more. I like Metroid more when it comes to 2D Metroid, so that's what I am going to vote for and think will win. Next up is Best Mobile Game, which thankfully all the garbage is relegated to its own kind of corner. We have Fire Emblem Heroes, Hidden Folks, Monument Valley 2, Old Man's Journey, and Super Mario Run.
Certainly Nintendo are getting their games in all these categories this year.
Yeah, somehow, just squeezing in there.
I barely played any of these games. I dabbled with Mario Run and I dabbled with Fire Emblem Heroes, and I did not really enjoy either of them. I don't even know what mobile gamers are enjoying the most out of these ones, and what is...
I mean, I know what they're spending the most money on, because fucking gacha systems. I would like Monument Valley 2 to win, probably, just because it's a game on mobile that is a real video game and not some bullshit, you know? And I've not played it, but I played the first one, and the first one's a great game. So I would like to give it to that. And I hope it wins as well. Next up, we have Best Independent Game, which is interesting, some of these nominations. Cuphead, Hellblade, Night in the Woods, Pyre, and What Remains of Edith Finch.
If we're doing the share around thing, which I think we've agreed they're not going to do it,
right?
Maybe it could be Pyre, because I've heard a lot of great things about that, but it's got to be Cuphead again, I guess. Yeah,
I think Hellblade has an outside shot, honestly. A lot of people talking that one up quite a bit, but I think it might get its due in different categories, so I think I'll say Cuphead again for there. Best ongoing game. So this is kind of similar to the esports thing. It's not a weird category at all, Bal. If you think about the state of the industry right now, like, games as a service is real, and it is here to stay, and people are playing these games constantly, you know? Like, as someone who didn't even start playing Overwatch until this year, and I've put 100 hours into Overwatch this year, that's an ongoing game.
Like we were saying at the start, it's like, what's the best sport of the year kind of feeling to this category? It's just
a little bit. But the thing with this is, like, there's going to be more that come and go from this category, I think, because eventually some of these won't last that long. You know, we don't know if Warframe will be around in 3 years' time. Anyway, the nominees: Destiny 2, Grand Theft Auto Online, Overwatch, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Rainbow Six Siege, and Warframe.
I guess it could be PUBG again.
Yeah. I would want Overwatch to win, because I think they've done... As someone who is new to that game, it is constantly updated all the time, and I didn't realise just how much work they put into that game. It's It's awesome. It's amazing. I want it to win, but PUBG is going to win, sadly. Or maybe not sadly, because people like PUBG. Next up, Games for Impact. Bury Me, My Love, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice, Life is Strange Before the Storm, Night in the Woods, Please Knock on My Door, and What Remains of Edith Finch.
Pass.
All right. It's funny because I think people are like talking about, hey, this is the category. I think Alex Navarro on the Beastcast today was like, oh, here are the indie games with progressive politics. Let's put them into this category, basically, is what it is. And that's very poignant a thought, I believe. I think Night in the Woods maybe has a shot in this category, but I feel like Hellblade, this is where it gets its due, because a lot of people are talking about how it deals with mental health and the fact that, like, the first credit in that game is the mental health expert they brought on board. So that's something that I think is very important. And I think is very interesting, and they did a good job with it. So next up is Best Performance. Ashley Birch as Aloy in Horizon Zero Dawn, Brian Bloom as BJ Blazkowicz in Wolfenstein II, Claudia Black as Chloe Frazier in Uncharted Lost Legacy, Laura Bailey as Nadine Ross in Uncharted Lost Legacy, and Melina Jurgens as Senua in Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
I've heard very good things about Wolfenstein 2. And sort of the characters in that game and stuff.
Right,
like
and the
this,
fact they took this guy, this meathead who shouldn't really be a good character in a shooter, no less, and made him a good character.
Okay.
So yeah, that's one that's possible. I think Aloy will probably take this. Ashley Birch as Aloy, just because it's a new IP and it's a new character and it was popular. I've heard very good things about Melina Jurgens in Hellblade. For me, I would pick Claudia Black as Chloe in Uncharted. I think she did a fantastic job in that game, and I really enjoyed that game, and I thought it was just fantastic performances from both Laura Bailey and Claudia Black, but I'll give it to Chloe. So that's where I lie. Next up is Best Audio Design. We have Destiny 2, Hellblade, Resident Evil 7, Super Mario Odyssey, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Fun fact, Breath of the Wild won Best Audio at the Golden Joysticks Awards recently, which I thought was a little weird. I like Breath of the Wild a lot. I don't know that I pick audio as its strong suit here. I don't know how you feel, Bally.
I think that in terms of like little sounds you hear on the environment around you, it is quite good. But I think
it's subtle.
It's subtle, but I think a game like something like Mario Odyssey might even do something like that better, where you were talking about running through it's sort of like a sheltered section, and you could hear your footsteps being echoed off the ceiling and stuff and the walls. So
right, I was like long jumping through a cave, and you could hear the audio difference between the echo of his voice when he long jumps from outside and inside. It was very cool, like little video I took while I was playing. I think Hellblade has a good shot here as well, because a lot of that game is voices inside your head, and the way they use like spatial audio is supposedly very good. The other one I think has a shot is Resident Evil, just because the idea of a horror and like VR and kind of the space around you, audio is very important for that kind of thing. So I think those two have probably the best shot out of this category. I don't know what I would choose. I'd probably choose Mario, I'd say, actually. Next up, best score / music, something that I have a strong opinion about. We have Cuphead, Destiny 2, Nier Automata, Persona 5, Super Mario Odyssey, and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
I know you're going to say Persona 5.
For sure.
I think as scores, Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild they're good. They're not incredible. I don't think they stand out in my mind as sort of the best aspects of those games, as great a games as they are. So, could be. I might like Persona 5 to it. I mean, Cuphead, score is also incredible from everything I've seen. So yeah, maybe those two.
I think it's between Cuphead and Persona. I think Persona wins this, because there are things in the months since Persona 5 that I've kind of waxed and waned on, and like there are some aspects I don't like as much, but the one thing out of everything that has stuck with me is that soundtrack. The music is astonishingly good. I am such a huge fan of it. It's my favourite soundtrack since the original Xenoblade, which shows you how much praise it gets from me. I hope that wins. God damn it. It's so good. I love it. Best Art Direction is up next. Cuphead, Destiny 2, Horizon Zero Dawn, Persona 5, and Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
If this doesn't go to Cuphead, there's something wrong with this entire thing we're going through. Like,
it's basically Best Art Direction presented by Cuphead, the award.
This is more if any other game wins an award and they deserve it, fine. But this game like deserves this award more than anything else on this entire list we've said so far, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I think the only thing that challenges it is Persona 5, just because of its style and the UI and all that stuff. It looks really great, but I agree, it's Cuphead. I want it to be Cuphead, it will be Cuphead. So, next up, Best Narrative, Hellblade, Horizon, Nier, What Remains of Edith Finch, and Wolfenstein II. And now I will give you my thoughts, because Bally has none.
I was going to say hopefully Wolfenstein, because that story sounds so cool, and I really want to play it when it comes out on Switch.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like, we're talking about a lot of these games. I'm like, Bally will never play any of these games. And I'm like, wait a second, he will play Wolfenstein, because that's coming to a Nintendo console. Holy shit. Yeah, I think Wolfenstein will win. I think it probably deserves to win. The only games narratives that I know of this list is Horizon, and honestly, I just wasn't very impressed by it. A lot of people were like, oh god, the story's so good in Horizon. I'm like, it's fine, I don't know, it's okay. So, maybe...
You've got a very high threshold for what a good story in a video game is, MBZ.
I don't know, I just think I have a certain... There's something
taste
about Horizon which is more sci-fi inflected than it is fantasy, despite the fact that it feels like a fantasy world you're running around with. And I think the thing that we discuss a lot of the time is that despite the fact that we like things like Star Wars, the fantasy elements of Star Wars is why I like Star Wars. Like, all these people go on about, the ships and the battles. I'm like, I really don't care about that stuff. Like, I care about the mysticism and the Jedi and the lightsabers.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely.
I care about the fantasy elements. So that's probably where I come down on it. Next up is Best Game Direction, which is Horizon Zero Dawn, Guerrilla Games, Resident Evil 7, Capcom, Super Mario Odyssey, Nintendo, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, Nintendo, and Wolfenstein 2, Machine Games.
What would your definition of game direction be?
I don't know. I think it's a weird category, because it's... So last couple of years, it's been Best Studio, right?
Yeah.
So they're awarding... But the stupid thing about that is that Best Studio were just the 5 studios who also were nominated for Game of the Year.
Exactly. Surely
Whereas
it
this
has to
time
be
it's
the same.
slightly different, where you have Resident Evil, which isn't nominated for Game of the Year, and you have Wolfenstein, which isn't nominated for Game of the Year, thrown in here. Which I don't really know what it means. I think it's kind of just like an excuse to get other games in Game of the Year lists.
Or is it like
almost
what takes a genre and takes a new direction?
Maybe kind of like a boldness.
And in that case, it has to be Zelda.
Yeah, like absolutely. The Breath of the Wild is one of the most innovative games in years. It is astonishing how it basically reinvented the open world genre after it had been tired for so long. And for that reason, I see no other winner in this category. Despite the fact that all these games are great, it's just Super Mario Odyssey is a very
if
good Mario Odyssey
take.
came out any other year, it would have walked Game of the Year. But like, you come out next to a generation-defining masterpiece, and it's kind of hard to compete.
Like, I think Odyssey does a lot of great things for reinventing the 3D platformer.
Sure.
And taking it forward a step, and that's great.
Right.
But it doesn't completely turn it on its head.
But at the end of the day, it's kind of still just a Mario game, as good as it is.
It is still just a Mario game. It is still more by the numbers. Is a very harsh description.
Because it does do a lot of new things. But
it evolves the formula, but it doesn't completely turn the formula on its head in the same way Breath of the Wild does.
Right. And so, then we get to Game of the Year. The 5 nominees are Horizon Zero Dawn, Persona 5, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, Super Mario Odyssey, and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
It's got to be Zelda, but I guess Dark Horse is PUBG.
It is a very dark horse. There are definitely people who are going to vote for PUBG for Game of the Year. And I know you wanted to have the discussion about whether it belongs here or not, but I honestly think that we should just move past this era of, whether we should consider something early access worthy or not, because yes, obviously it's this game that's still like kind of being worked on, but also most games are still kind of being worked on. To some degree, Splatoon is in that way because it's still having things added to it, like, is a game ever really done these days? Like, even Breath of the Wild has DLC coming to it, and it had that weird Xenoblade quest.
It's like best ongoing game, as you were saying earlier. It's like, what?
Like, every game is an ongoing game at this point. That's kind of just the way the industry has moved. And so trying to pigeonhole PUBG as like, oh, well, it's not officially out yet. Like, on December when it comes out, will it have materially changed from what it is right now? Not really. It's kind of the same game. The only difference is they put a 1.0 label on it.
It's just this idea that it might finally be released as a more complete package? And then once that happens, should it be allowed to be in the Game of the Year category again?
No, that's where I come down harsh on it. It's like, it should only be nominated once. It has one shot.
Like, this is its time to shine. Exactly.
Right, and honestly, this year is going to be its biggest year, I think. Like, it will probably continue to be very popular, but I don't think it's going to be discussed in the zeitgeist like it was this year, because it came out this year, basically. And ultimately, if it's a game that you are putting money down for, there's no reason for it not to be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
And it is going to be part of the conversation, but my buck stops at, I just don't think it's good enough to beat these other games in this category. I've played every game in this category aside from PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, so sure, I've got bias here, the fact that I haven't actually played it, but I've played Fortnite, and I feel like I get the idea well enough. I know what that game is about and what the general premise behind it is. And these other 4 games are just incredibly polished, well-designed games that came out and are amazing. And so I would really prefer it if it didn't win. But hey, it doesn't need to win because it sold more copies than probably all 4 of those other games combined. It's a juggernaut.
Fanboy speaking here, but 2 Nintendo games in the Game of the Year category in any year is just staggering, and I can't remember the last time that has ever happened.
I don't think it has, honestly. Like, if you think about when was the last time Nintendo had 2 enormously popular, like, critically acclaimed games, and I think back to the N64 era with Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time, in terms of the 1-2 Mario Zelda Punch, and they didn't come out in the same year. So
in terms of like Nintendo games that won lots of Game of the Year awards, maybe something like the Galaxy games. I don't.
Yeah, Galaxy, I think, was the last time Nintendo were really in serious consideration for Game of the Year awards. And since then, yeah, it's definitely been, this last decade has been rough, I think, for Nintendo. And they're finally coming out of it. But I struggle to think of other games since then that have had that like kind of wide-reaching impact and critical acclaim.
But we said, like, backs up against the wall Nintendo is the best kind of Nintendo, and this is maybe the result of that. Yeah,
the Wii U era made them get good again, and as we always say, never count Nintendo out, and, well, you shouldn't, because they're back, I guess. I think Zelda wins this. I think it should win it. I think it's one of the best games ever made, and, like, months on from that game, I think back on it incredibly fondly, and I want to play more of it, and that DLC is happening soon, I hope. Hopefully there's a trailer for it during the Game Awards themselves.
Stealth drop after the Game Awards.
Oh boy, that would be very exciting. That would be very exciting. In any case, that is going to wrap things up for our kind of discussion on the Game Awards. Do you think there's going to be some big reveals this year, Bally? I don't know if you're going to be staying up to watch it or not.
Well, that's been unsuccessful in the past when I've tried.
It has. I remember when you fell asleep. Oh, that was great.
If there is a big reveal, I think it is just potentially something like an announcement of a stealth drop of the Zelda DLC. And
yeah, you don't think Nintendo's going to give them like a crazy Metroid Prime 4 trailer or something? You're not going to be that caliber.
I mean, there is always a chance.
Right.
I'm not feeling it. I'm feeling like if they had anything in those echelons, they'd save it for E3, or a direct.
What if they reveal Retro Studios game? Huh? How about that? No, no chance of that happening.
More Donkey Kong. Let's do it.
Yeah. Look, I will be the only person who's not complaining they're doing a third Donkey Kong game. Probably.
I think if that happens, that's fine.
I've really turned around on that, honestly, because like at the time, like I'd played some Returns. I wasn't like super. I was like, oh god, another Donkey Kong game. The thing is, I'm not a Metroid Prime fan, so like I wasn't someone who was like clamoring for them to do that.
Right.
I would really love Retro to just do something new, for God's sake, and I think that's probably what they're doing.
If they do a Prime game, I mean, they're not working on 4, are they? So like,
no.
If they're doing Donkey Kong or something new, either way, it's great. We just want to see it.
Look, Tropical Freeze is an incredible game. So if they finish out a trilogy, all power to them. I just think people are going to be very mad about it, and I think Nintendo rarely kind of react to fans in a pretty savage way, but they did once after Wind Waker with Twilight Princess, and I think with Donkey Kong it might be the same. Sad as that may be. But I think Retro are going to go in a different direction, and I'm looking forward to it. But that's basically going to wrap us up, so let's get out of here. Before we do, we've got things to plug and talk about. Of course, we launched our Patreon, and we reached our first goal, Bally, which unlocked our first podcast, TNL Ranks. We're going to be putting out the first episode of that a week after this podcast goes up. So if you'd like to get access to that brand new podcast for our Patreon, that will be on our $2 tier, and you'll get access straight away. A bunch of cool other stuff that we have on that Patreon.
We should say our first episode of TNL Ranks, we're going to be talking about our top 2D platformers.
Absolutely. So that's going to be a fun discussion. I hope you'll enjoy that. And you can find that at patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife. And yeah, if you would like to support us in any way, that would be very much appreciated. We also would like to hear from you because Game of the Year is coming up. We just talked about it this entire segment. And we are, of course, going to be doing our 2 Game of the Year shows as per tradition. The first one, which will be the first week or the first show in December, is going to be our top 10 games that we played this year that didn't actually come out this year, and then our second show is going to be us trying to figure out a top 5, God help us, for Nintendo games that came out in 2017, and that will be a fun discussion as well. But we want to hear from you. What were your favourite games that you played this year, whether they came out this year or not? Send those to thisnintendolife@gmail.com, or go to our Discord server and drop us your thoughts there. Maybe it'd be a good idea to open a Game of the Year thread there, or maybe just put it in the email segment. Probably the email segment is easier, so that we don't clutter things even more. So yeah, go over there and give us your thoughts on your Game of the Year picks. And then Bally, we also have a feature coming up in the new year. What should people be doing?
It's our Backlog Club, and of course it is Final Fantasy VI. It's quite a long game. I think it's about 30 to 35 hours, so get playing. We are probably going to talk about that at the end of January. That's roughly where we're scheduling it for now. So yeah, get started with that. It's available on everything but the Wii U apparently. So
pretty much.
Make sure to find that. Is of course on the SNES Classic and the Wii eShop if you want to play that. Oh, and of course it's on the Super Nintendo if you really want to go hardcore.
Oh yeah, that's how we're playing it. The Super Nintendo Classic, I should say, not the actual Super Nintendo.
I am definitely using a lot of save states, but I'm getting there. And yeah, we'll talk about that end of January. So yeah, I think that's the 3 big announcements we had for the end of the show.
Fantastic. So let's just plug ourselves and get on out of here. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter. I am at LordNBZ, and I'm talking about whatever. I don't know. It's Twitter. You just say things. Bally, where can people see you say things on Twitter?
See me say things on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91. And make sure to follow the podcast Twitter account. That's at TNL Podcast. That's at TNL Podcast. That's the best place to go. It's got a link to our Discord. It's got a link to our Patreon. It's got links to everything you need that we've been talking about.
It's a nice little hub there, the Twitter account, for
nice
everything
hub.
we
definitely
discuss.
Recommend that.
Yeah. You can find the show in various places. We're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher, we're on every good podcatcher out there. You can download us, you can rate us, you can review us on iTunes. Reviewing us on iTunes is now the second best thing you can do for the podcast because we have a Patreon now, so that's the number one best thing you can do. But reviews on iTunes are absolutely useful, valuable, and we treasure them greatly. So if you have not gone out of your way to do that, it's a very simple process, and it helps a huge amount. So if you want to give us a present for the holiday, then send us an iTunes review. We would be most welcoming of that. Anything else we need to talk about, Bally, before we get on out of here?
I've just got to go play all these games before the end of the year because they're building up.
Yeah, we're drowning. We're absolutely drowning. But we will get through, and we'll be talking about that very soon. So join us next time for the next episode when we'll be talking about Game of the Year stuff, and we hope you will look forward to that as we do. So thank you, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye, everyone. The musical interludes used on today's show were Angel Wings from Rocket League, copyright Psyonix 2015, and Uberviolence from Wolfenstein II: The New Colossus. Copyright Machine Games, Bethesda, 2017.
I suspect you'll have a hard time deciding which game wins based on your different opinion. I'll probably side with Barry. Barry?
That's
I'm
your new
going to
name,
start
Barry?
this again. That was too many trips. Who is Barry? Right.
Fucking Barry. Hey, welcome to TNL Podcast with NBZ and Barry. How you doing, Barry? You fall off that cliff again?
You
never watched EastEnders, did you? Oh, god damn it.
Okay, do you want to clap?
Yeah, I already did.
Okay, cool.
Barry was the best part of EastEnders. They shouldn't have killed Barry. That's all I'm saying.
Are we ready?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, Barry.